our side, I extend a very hearty welcome to all of you in today's book launch and discussion program on the book Transformative Practices in Archaeology, Empowering Communities and Shaping the Sustainable Futures, which is an edited volume of a conference, Unsettled Archaeology, which has been edited by Professor Alok Kumar Kanungo and others. It will be a great honor to welcome dignitaries who will do the honor of launching the book and also will share thoughts about the book. We have with us a very eminent scholar, administrator, and a person who has contributed so significantly in the field, Professor Kishore K. Basa, who is currently the chairman of Monument Authority, National Monument Authority, and has served several positions. So thank you, sir, for sparing valuable time to grace this occasion. Of course, we have with us Dr. Alok Kumar Kanungo, who is one of the editors. He is the main chief editor of the book in the sequence, and he was very keen to do this book launch here at agency, and I thank him and welcome him to agency. Due to some prior or sudden commitments, Sri Dubir Singh Rawat, who is Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, who was the guest of honor, was not able to make it. He has conveyed his best wishes, so thank you, sir, for your wishes, and we look forward to welcome you sometime else. Suddenly we got some important meeting. Dr. Sachidanand Joshi, Member Secretary Agency, who was supposed to chair today's discussion, was not able to make it. He has also sent his best wishes. We are hoping that another editor, Professor Claire Smith, might join us online. We have sent link to her. We are waiting her to join. The link is on, so expecting that she may join. Welcome to you all, my colleagues at agency and the eminent guests, and particularly I would like to welcome a very eminent guest today, Dr. Sanjay Mundul, who is the ADZ National Archaeological Survey of India and a very keen contributor in the field of education in archaeology. My colleague Anil, who is heading Janpa Sampada Division, and all of you. Today's book launch is under agency book circle program, under which we keep on organizing various kind of book launches. It is on very important topic. We all know that although we have number of legislations and even in our constitution, in Article 49, where there is the obligations of the state to protect the heritage, particularly monuments, and also Article 51AF, which give a lot of emphasis on particularly duties, people's duty, citizens' duty to safeguard our heritage. And time to time we have various acts coming up by the Government of India. We all know that we have protected monument under Archaeological Survey of India, and there are a lot of unprotected monument which definitely need citizens' involvement, and I think communities are much more responsible to safeguard such heritage. So I think I'm not the expert in the field, but whatever I have glanced through the various articles published in this week, this contain articles from very eminent scholars from India and abroad, and a very wonderful compilation of various thoughts. And I'm sure that our guest today will speak more about it. But only my opening words that we have to act. We have various kind of process to recognize, identify, and safeguard heritage. But still, we are facing a lot of challenges. Like under UNESCO World Heritage, we have provisions to declare monuments and also to create Creative Cities Network to safeguard the World Heritage. But it's still, I think, for a country like India, where so many monuments or heritage, not just tangible but also natural heritage. There are a number of areas where still we have not done much. So I think book like this will give us a lot of opportunity to think over it and also to find out ways and means that how we can empower our communities, and with the help of them we can preserve our heritage for the future. Because many of the years these things have been there, and we are blessed with to see many monuments in wonderful condition. But I think our responsibility is that we should keep them in similar condition for our future generations. So discussions like this will definitely help us in giving new thoughts and ideas, and I'm sure today's book discussion will give us more thoughts and ideas. But without taking more time, I close my remarks and welcome you all to IGNC, and thanks both our honorable guest and the speaker, author, editors of the book for giving us opportunity to welcome them and to launch this book. Thank you very much.
This is indeed an honor to be in a hall where my teachers of archaeology, anthropology, and life are here, along with the colleagues and my students. Particularly, I am thankful to Dr. C. Margavando, who made all the effort to be here. And reading his work, I started a PhD on glass. He worked on antiquity, and that was my beginning of archaeology. And I have my teacher from my college days, Professor Kishore Basa, as the chief guest. Nothing could have been more honored than what the day today is. And the other side of me is Dr. Sanjay Manju. He doesn't need any introduction other than maybe the chariot man today. We have Dr. Sunil Gupta, and who has been one of my mentors from my PhD days, and we did PhD together, being in the same hostel. And today he has the Prime Minister Museum. And we have Dr. Anil Tiwari. When I came to Baroda, to IIT Gandhinagar, he was the first archaeologist after Y.S. Rawat, who met me and who became more of a mentor and friend rather than an archaeology officer. And Dr. Bhuvan Vikram, with whom I have collaborated in many works, and we have Gautami from ASI, and many others. And I am expecting Professor Pramod Pandey, my Vice Chancellor of Deccan College. He is on the way, so he and his family. And another name I would take is my student who did a master dissertation with me, Devanshi Saxena, sitting there. She came all the way from She lives in Bareilly, he works in Cordoba, and she's come all the way. With this gathering, it makes me very blessed, I would say, and having a book release in IGNCA, which every Indologist, cultural anthropologist, or archaeologist dreamed come to. And this is a book what we thought of having worked on glass, antiquity, iron or ceramic. For whom are you doing this archaeology? I come from Orissa, from a village, and the people with whom I was brought up are Bondo and Juang communities. There are two places where my father was appointed. I always treat a Bondo woman as my second mother because I was the fifth child of my family, and my sister is not even 1 year elder than me, 11 months elder than me. That you understand that I had hardly any time with my mother. Then the lady who took care of my home. And they are the people, she was a Bondo lady, right from childhood, as you know, for whom are we studying? Do they know that we are studying them, or we are using them more of a subject, of a static object or a subject? And if we say that we are to empower them, if they understand their culture, the Bondo in Naga, where Naga is second area where I worked a little longer, and Professor lets me to watch Borungas. Today she is with the Borungas, so she may not be able to join us. And then the question comes, if we allow them to study their past, if they do their past, then what is our position? Who are we? There is a conflict between indigenous and non-indigenous. Most of the people who are doing archaeology are non-indigenous people trying to understand archaeology past through indigenous people. We most of our, but then again, who is non-indigenous, who is indigenous? At certain place, we say if you go to hill area, it's Naga, you can say of Naga hill. But if you go to Mandu area, there are 4 communities which are in Madhya Pradesh, as we are indigenous. So who studying for whom? So that is the background of this book. In specific eco zones, they are made for specific. In a case like if you take example Dhulavira, the hydrology was made for specific number of people. The globalization, then what impact comes up? Then it comes to tourism becomes very diversified nowadays. Every tourist has different demand. But then the heritage rule, what about the heritage rule? Who comes there? The heritage is made by whom? The specific feature was made by whom? So how do we respect that? If the tourism diversified from different belief system people come in, then cultural diversity also starting to erode. So this is a class, and the environment changes, developmental pressure increases, and that comes of protection of heritage is our identity. And the identity and the dynamic and variability, that has become a bigger challenges now. And about ensuring the survival of cultural diversity, if you think of identity, will this identity of cultural identity will safeguard the cultural diversity, or it will become the other way around? The more we talk about identity, more we talk about our own indigenous identity, then is it going to affect this? And that is more or less mirrors in the biodiversity. Because the cultural identity, indigenous identity is invariably related to biodiversity. If you make that cultural diversity as a tourist place, as a heritage, then what about this natural biodiversity? Biodiversity is natural, we cannot play with that. In that context, and its loss reduces the benefits of humankind can derive from them. So we need to, in one way, talk about heritage protection, then we have to talk about biodiversity protection. If you don't do that, the balance goes, and in that balance goes, then for our future we are not doing anything. And this connection remains very poorly understood, specifically in South Asia. We start doing archaeology without worrying about what would happen to biodiversity. We start developing certain places as heritage places. We don't care about the biodiversity of that place. Where that place, the natural biodiversity, was not meant to take 1 lakh visitors. If that 1 lakh visitor comes, then you are cleaning this biodiversity. If you are cleaning the biodiversity, then what about the natural heritage? And then it comes, if you think of that, then where lies the key of understanding this? That's probably the memory. That's the memory of our seniors, of our older generation, of indigenous community, of the people who have lived in a lifetime where there was a balance between heritage, biodiversity, tourism, that there was a balance. So to know that comes from social memory, and that inevitably bounds up with a variety of social processes that includes communities and their identity. Again, it comes to community trying to say, this is why today all communities are trying to talk about their identity. They are fighting for their identity because we have put them to that place. Otherwise, the identity was more or less mirror to them, that is, they are fighting for it today. We are trying to say we are Nagas, we are Bondos. What is that? Because their heritage and their community, we have made a gap in that. And one of the key factors in strengthening a sense of community is to fortify the relationship of the people with that place. That fortification, if we can make, that is the essence of this book. How do we fortify a relationship to the place of the people? it's not identity of Naga, it's identity of Naga Hills. It's not identity of Naga Hills, it's identity of Naga heritage, it's ownership. And that ownership, I allow you to visit me with the due respect to my own heritage. And that heritage has the potential to host such ties, and that is something we need to take care of. And as archaeology and cultural heritage, if you come in, archaeology, heritage, indigenous worldview have often been at odds to each other. We many a time we do not care for worldview. Then again, worldview. If you talk of worldview, yesterday we had a discussion on hydrology. Then it's in the worldview of the water. One of my students talked about worldview of water. The people in Barunga community were probably blessed with words. If you give them a bottle of water to drink, if you invite them to drink. You give a bottle of water, mineral water. Said no. I said, why are you not drinking? This water is dead. Simple answer is water. For them, water is life. Like when you met them in the last week, say water is dead. They have brought the water from their village in those leather bed, and they said we will drink this because this is a live water, because that water is associated to their culture. So there is, but at the same time, to talk that in a system where there is a difference of hydrology, then what do you talk about? Then there is a worldview. Also depends on the ecozones. That would vary. And in that archaeological analysis of patterning a material culture generates insights of human behavior. What we want to understand is a human behavior. That we know. That's right. Indigenous archaeologists from USA, Australia, France, Southeast Asia, and different part of India, and the major question to them was asked, what would happen if we decide that our core aim of as a heritage scholar is to learn from and work for local communities rather than working for ours. And if that is the case, can archaeology help redress social and economic issues of great magnitude? Because their demand is economic. And if so, how might we make such quantum leap? And with this program, we invited a good number of papers, and this volume offers diverse and global understanding of archaeological practices, fosters holistic understanding of heritage preservation, demonstrate the value of ethnographic and ethnoarchaeological research in contemporary South Asia, explores the link between cultural and environmental heritage, and finally, it examines the role of archaeology in contemporary society versus contemporizing archaeology. Are you contemporary archaeology or studying contemporary society? And it has got 22 chapters. And Larry Zimmerman, who is a pioneer in this indigenous archaeology, he talks about whose heritage we are talking of and whose knowledge. For whom are we creating that knowledge? Are we translating that to this indigenous community? That's the chapter it discusses. And then similarly, Professor Basa will talk about his own work, and then Professor Claire Smith and my colleague Ambika Ayodhya, they discuss about underlying distinction between traditional and scientific knowledge. What we many a time people try to interpret traditional knowledge to fundamental knowledge. There we need to take little bit of caution. It cannot be fundamental science, but what is knowledge system? Is it closer to science or no? That's what they discuss in their paper. Then the paper also includes the engagement with the indigenous community around the world, discussing issues of the role of archaeology and anthropology preserving social memory. For instance, Dr. Nishant, the co-editor of this volume, and his student Rathwa is a indigenous being, work on how displaced residents engage material culture to adapt to their new environments, and how that memory helps them engaging to the heritage, how they respect the heritage. If you are displaced from one place, with the association with that place goes, then you go to new place, how much you value your heritage. So what they carry is the memory. Then Belina, who is a professor in CNRS, she talked about what about the heritage and place of the seafaring community, the community who are always on travel. So what they talked about, it is not placement, it is emplaced community. What they talk about heritage, that volume. Then Jaya Menon and Supriya Verma and her group talked about this Mandu as a heritage of cultural history in Madhya Pradesh. In that they talk who is indigenous. Because there are many communities who are claiming themselves to be the indigenous, and that outlines challenges of doing heritage work becomes a problem. Then one of the issues of the volume also addressed is how cultural practitioners, what we say ourselves, we are cultural practitioners as scientists can create community engagement, awareness in the science, and how communities can equal stakeholder in their past. When we study, we need to make this local community as an equal partner. It comes as studies of the archaeological sites by Professor Ravi Kurisetar, or the restoration of Great Hathras, which was carried out by the UNESCO under the leadership of Professor Massimo Vidale. They talk about war and conflict, how to address that question to the heritage. Then the respectable number of chapters also discusses the living cultural heritage in various communities, how these may be integrated into sustainable development models such as ecotourism, museum construction, entrepreneur, and while doing that, how much and how far we are integrating the indigenous people, are we working with them? For instance, my own studies and of the Kharpuri, Dr. Kharpuri, of the Naga and Khasi megalithic culture, and Alina Sumi, who was the nodal officer for this conference, they worked on artisanal production of salt among the Porphyry Nagas, and we worked on the megalithic memorial erection. And other case studies includes Mahua collection from the Rakhwa Hills by Jamil, and critical assessment of Adopt Heritage Project, which is sustainable development initiative undertaken by the Government of India in collaboration with the Archaeological Council of India. He is your own faculty, Dr. Arun Reddy. Then we have Madhulika Samanta, ASI director, and her chapters talks about threat of mining and energy extraction on a built heritage in Sonbhadra, which goes several centuries. She argues that policy must acknowledge that the people's livelihood should be respected. We shouldn't make only policies, and when it's state of heritage initiative, then we should think of giving a lucrative allowance to the local community. Finally, the book includes a few theoretical chapters by Professor Saida Ansari of Deccan College Professor Institute and Mimai Ghosh, and then we have Prasant Singh, my own student. They examine object-oriented ontologies and the construction of material culture and heritage in a contemporary framework of anthropology. Of course, that forward is available online and everybody can read. And it was good to see a synthesis of the book put in the forward, and he starts with saying, true to the spirit of Vasudeva Kutumbam.
It's indeed a great pleasure and privilege for me to be associated with this program of the release of a very interesting book, Transformative Practices in Archaeology, Empowering Communities and Shaping Sustainable Futures, edited by Alok Kumar Kanungo, Clara Smith, Nishant Choksi as editors. My colleague Sanjay ji, student and colleague Dr. Kanungo, Professor Anil ji. Sir, namaskar sir. Aapko. Sir, Marvin sir. Because I must say that it's a great privilege for me that Dr. Margavandhu sir is present here. When I was doing my PhD at the Institute of Archaeology in 1988, I came and met sir in relation to my research, and he had helped me a lot. And Anilji and Bhuvan and all of you, Dr. Gupta is there. I mean, so many friends, it's difficult to name all of you, but it's indeed a great pleasure to be associated with this book release. Now, I think you have heard mostly the most authentic account from the editor. So I am one of the authors. So it's a difficult thing for me, to speak about the book or my paper and that kind of thing. But what I will do is I will try to first situate the book in the contemporary academic scenario, and maybe towards I'll speak something on my paper. I must confess that I have not read the entire book. I must be candid enough to say that. But what I would certainly say is that if at all I attended this conference and wrote this paper, the credit entirely goes to Alok. Because at the time I was the Vice Chancellor and I had just submitted I was preparing for submission of the self-study report of the NAC accreditation, which is a hell of a job. And he said, first he said about the conference, so it is easier to send an abstract. So abstract भेज दिया. मैंने सोचा कि abstract तो भेज दिया, बस my job is over and maybe I will contribute in the publication, but I will not attend the conference. So that was my idea. But your students become more clever than you. They outwit you. There's a generation gap. So we must accept that. Your students are much smarter, much more knowledgeable. They will not say that, but they are. So let us confess that candidly by all teachers. He insisted. And he said, all right, sir, you cannot come for 3 days. You just come for a day. And believe me, I went for a day. And because I had to attend the conference, I have to write the paper. You can't just escape it. So I had to write the paper. But I am grateful to him for one simple reason, is that in my entire life, I have never got that kind of response. I have attended so many conferences, so many presentations of papers, but after this paper, the kind of response I got from my colleagues, everybody who was there, that made me sort of feel that I have made some sense in the conference, and that encouraged me to write sort of the complete paper. So full credit to you, Alok. Now, coming back to the question of this book. Now, when we teach archaeology in any other university or in other classroom, there are various ways of defining archaeology. There are very funny way of sort of defining archaeology. Some people say that, well, life history archaeology is bunk. And some people say that, well, it's a harmless hobby of the upper middle class. Some people say that, well, no, it's not. It's a more serious term. It's a soft science and an expensive art. So archaeology has been defined in various ways. But then we always said that professional archaeologists like Anil and others, we would say that, well, it is a reconstruction of the past on the basis of material elements. That's the simplest way to define it. But then the challenge in archaeology is that you always excavate partial remains. You do not excavate the entire thing. So, how to reconstruct the whole of the past on the basis of partial remains? That has been the biggest challenge for all archaeological research. In the past, in present, in future. That is the biggest challenge. Now, once you have that kind of challenge, then you try to address, how do I fill up the gap? How do I interpret it? So therefore, archaeology has to be multidisciplinary. There is no escape from that. But then the question is, like archaeology, which are archaeology, ethnography, and museum. All these are colonial constructs in Indian context. Now, so what was happening here? Before I come to that issue, let me take. I have a problem with the term indigenous, because the way the term indigenous is perceived in Australia, America, and Canada, it cannot be perceived the same in India, because all this, whether it is Canada, Australia, or Canada, America, or Australia, there is a difference between the population that was living in the continent and a settler population. Therefore, they use the term indigenous. But in our case, it's not the case. Therefore, either when we are using the term indigenous, it has to be qualitatively different from the way it is perceived in America, Canada, and Australia. Or in what I did was, I did not use the term indigenous in my paper. Therefore, I wrote traditional. I know the term traditional is not free from problems, but I thought that between the two terms, traditional and indigenous, I preferred the term traditional. That is the first thing I want to explain. Now, coming back to the question of the community engagement. The challenge is, you see, when you are in a 21st century scenario, Professor Gaur was rightly pointing out that, we interrogate ourselves. Now, if I am doing archaeology, is it enough? Why the hell? I always ask my students who come to the MA classes in anthropology, I will say that, please tell me, if you would not have come to anthropology for your post-graduation, certainly you would not suffer from indigestion. आपको तो stomach में तो problem कुछ नहीं होगा, तो आते क्यों? Why are you coming and joining this course? Now, I provoke my students. I mean, I don't ask how much percentage your mark secured किया, मैं कुछ नहीं पूछता. मैं दो सवाल करता हूँ. This is the first one, and secondly, I asked that could you please tell me the names of 5 books which you have read from page 1 to page end of the book. And usually you don't find quite clear रहते हैं. ये तो आजकल का कट एंड पेस्ट जमाना है, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस जमाना तो आ गया है, फिर भी और कुछ है. The point I am telling you is that all of us interrogate ourselves. Why I am in this profession? If I would not in this profession, मैं क्या करता? नौकरी के बात छोड़िए. That is a sort of struggle for your life, struggle for your existence. If you do not interrogate ourselves, what is the wider ramifications of your discipline vis-a-vis the society, then perhaps you are missing the most fundamental aspect of your discipline. And that is the thing which this book is trying to do. I mean, it is trying to understand not merely archaeology as a profession, not merely archaeology as a way of doing scientific study of a community or quote and unquote, but beyond archaeology as a profession. How does archaeology as a discipline fit into the needs of the community? I mean, unless and until we ask that kind of question, perhaps we will remain in the domain of an elitist, thinking about very big things about our society and having a satisfaction that we are doing a great job and talking about ourselves, forgetting the 99.9% of the people. That's the issue. So this is the first point that I would like to make about this book, that it is going beyond the disciplinary requirement of a discipline. This is, and it is trying to make it relevant to the contemporary situation. Now, having said that, let me just come back to what I thought, that why I wrote this paper, Traditional Knowledge Systems and Indian Archaeology's Problems and Perspectives. I wrote because I had the background of 3 disciplines. One is, of course, archaeology. The other is anthropology, and then I was director of 2 museums, so I studied museums also. And all these disciplines, anthropology, archaeology, and museums, are in Indian context, although we had the traditions earlier, but these are basically colonial constructs. Now, if these are colonial constructs, then how does the difference between, let's say, the traditional knowledge system and the archaeology? For example, while colonial archaeology in general valorized the past of India by emphasizing the grandeur of the past, colonial ethnography either romanticized the exotic aspects or demonized the present but emphasizing the squalor of the present. That is contemporary ethnography. However, both archaeology and ethnography during the colonial period claimed to be scientific practices, but both provided legitimacy to colonial rule in the name of civilizing mission in India, so that the grandeur of the past could be revived and the uncivilized natives' present could be civilized. Now, this is the colonial ethnography and colonial archaeology. Now, but then point is, when in the 1970s, new museology is coming. New museology is coming, where again the same question, the way archaeologists have been asking now, the museologists started asking that, well, what kind of work we are doing? It's in a third world country, why should I preserve my material culture? What is its relevance? Now, therefore, new museology came, which emphasized again the community engagement of the museums. They said that it is the new museology is nothing but emphasizing the community engagement. The voice of the community has to be heard in the museums. You see, therefore the luxury of the curator as the sole custodian of cultural heritage eroded because the moment you give primacy to the community, that means the moment you want to give primacy to the community's voice, that means the role of the curator shifts from the sole custodian of cultural heritage to a facilitator in the dissemination of the community voice for the cause of culture. That is a basic shift. Now when I see archaeology, therefore I find that and what is happening in anthropology, I'm talking of post-colonial situation now. And post-colonialism in fact brought serious challenges to all these disciplines, whether it is anthropology, whether it is museum studies, whether it is archaeology. Because some unpleasant questions were set in the tune of post-colonial theory. Now, when it is happening in the post-colonial theory, what is happening is the colonial stereotypical image set by the colonial ethnographers were challenged in the post-colonial context. The same way, some of the museums also, the moment they wanted to give voice to the voiceless in the name of hearing the voice of the communities, they also addressed, what was previously was peripheral came to the center stage of discourse in museology. That kind of thing has started happening in archaeology also. The kind of narratives that were brought, that were given in the in the colonial period, are being challenged in the post-colonial situation. Now, keeping all these things in mind, what I said was, I was trying to get the community. I took the community engagement perspective of new museology into Indian archaeology, and then I tried to examine what is the community engagement in, what are the issues in community engagement in Indian archaeology. First is the problem in India is that usually there is a feeling of alienation or indifference of local people with local archaeological heritage after excavation, since they generally lack access to excavated materials. Secondly, an overemphasis on archaeology as science, site conservation and management, assuming the community as destroyer of heritage, has alienated the communities from archaeological site management strategies. In order to mitigate these problems, there is a need to involve the nearby communities as important stakeholders rather than a destroyer of heritage. Some such steps may include exhibition involving the community and then also using the elements of traditional knowledge system into your archaeological interpretation. Now that is there. But the other point is that what is the role of traditional knowledge system for Indian archaeology? What could be the possible role? One is that elements of traditional knowledge systems help interpret the possible functions, meaning and importance of archaeological remains. Ethnoarchaeology has been practiced day in and day out. Secondly, traditional knowledge system has the potential to be a source for more diverse archaeological interpretations, which may include, among other things, archaeology of children, women and eco-friendly domestic architecture, use of plants for medicinal purposes, more emphasis on water management and traditional games. I mean, all these things are missing from the archaeological interpretations. Thirdly, archaeology can and has the potential to historicize, to me this is very important, to historicize the primarily ahistorical traditional knowledge system. When we say something traditional knowledge system, we do not know how old it is. We just said it has come down orally from traditions, oral traditions में आ रहा है, but उसको कब शुरू हुआ है हमको पता नहीं. Therefore, traditional elements of traditional knowledge systems go, if you want to historicize, then archaeology perhaps is a very good way to do that. Another possibility is to locate the lessons of traditional knowledge systems from ethnographic studies of various tribal groups in India, such as sustainable livelihood, as well as symbiotic relationship between community and ecology in archaeological context. क्या है? When you are doing ethnographic studies, you will say that this is a sustainable livelihood practices. We can say that the tribal people are the best who have made a synergy between nature and culture. ये सब हम contemporary situation में हम कहते हैं. Is it possible to find out these elements in our archaeological context? That is another challenge for us. And then, besides, it may show that the universal message of tribal societies regarding their symbiotic relationship between nature and culture was also there in the past, which the mainstream populations have forgotten in the name of development and which the tribal societies have retained in their collective memory. Therefore, here is a case that we the urbanites, English-speaking population, we think that we know much more. आप जब गांव में जाते हैं ना, हम लोग जाते हैं फील्ड वर्क करने के लिए, and that is the best way to teach my students how less you know, because पेड़ तो पहचान नहीं सकते, पत्थर तो आप साइंटिफिक में कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि वो जो ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज सिस्टम में जो वाटर मैनेजमेंट है, उनका जो डी है, I mean, I don't know whether you have seen that. All these things is that new thing for our urban students. उसमें मैं बताता हूँ उनको, देखो भाई, ये तुम किताबें नहीं पढ़े हो. You have come and look, these people are practicing as a matter of practice, उनके कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. तो sometimes we must set off arrogance that we know much. It is time that we must try to learn from these traditional practices which will make our life more conducive by balancing nature with culture. That is what is required. Therefore, these are cases where you have to learn from the traditional so-called uncivilized, sort of illiterate, non-literate. I never use the term illiterate. For God's sake, do not use the term illiterate. Somebody could be non-literate. Nobody is illiterate. You see, these fundamental things we must try to understand. Therefore, we have to learn from them rather than we teaching them. हमारा जो arrogance है, हम उनको सिखाते हैं. भाई, it is time that you should थोड़ा सा अपने आप को नमन करके try to learn from them. That is what traditional knowledge system can do for archaeology. That's what I am saying. Now, with this, I developed a concept. I took this concept from anthropology, autoethnography. What is autoethnography? Autoethnography is to very simply, it is said that it is also a post-colonial. It's a product of post-colonial theory. See, autoethnography means a person belonging to a community is writing about his or her community. इतना simple term में autoethnography हुई है. Why they are doing it? For example, my friend Professor Vinay Sabra died. He is a professor at Delhi University. He told me that at some point, students from Northeast have started coming to anthropology department, and the number gradually became more and more. And then he started asking, why are you coming to Delhi University? They said, we are coming here to learn the theoretical perspective, so that we will go back and we will read what these colonial narratives are there about us. For example, a very well-known anthropologist like Farah Hemandov writing a book called The Naked Nagas. Now try to understand in Nagas, how will he react? Because this title Naked Nagas is not meant for Nagas. His term of preference is Western readers. तो provocative title नहीं देने से Western readers will not read that book. Now these students are coming, they are reading those texts, and they are going back, studying their community and challenging these texts. Now, so therefore autoethnography has developed, and autoethnography is developing in a very fast manner in Northeast India. So I took this concept from this anthropology, and I tried to see whether, I mean, this is what I visualize, that why not then some community persons, उनका जो heritage है, if they start writing, that will sort of herald a new picture. It may so happen. For example, the Gonds, let us say, there are in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, East area में, the Gonds are there, and the Gonds, and if you see that there are also some fortified structures are there which belong to the Gond heritage. So my visualization is that if a Gond person learning archaeology and does archaeological studies or excavations or archaeology, he reports, he may write a totally different kind of report than all of us are writing. So that is what I visualize, that let us wait. I mean, therefore auto archaeology can be practiced in India, and again the tradition has already started in Northeast. आपका Nagaland में your students are there. They are writing on the Nagaland archaeological heritage, and in this volume also there are there are 1 or 2 papers on megalithic remains are there, where they are studying their own culture. Now, what is its benefit? बेनिफिट क्या है? एक दो बेनिफिट है. फर्स्ट बेनिफिट इज इट एड्स, therefore the archaeological interpretations are not becoming monolithic, uni-explanatory. Archaeological applications becoming more, interpretations are becoming more diverse. This is one benefit of archaeology. The second benefit of archaeology is what we call in anthropology emic perspective. There is a difference between ethic and emic. Ethic is an outsider's perception of a particular community or community practices. Emic is the insider's view. So therefore, archaeology would lead, hopefully, to some kind of an emic perspective in Indian archaeology. Now, to conclude, I would say that I have dealt here three aspects: traditional knowledge system, new museology, and autoethnography, as well as their implications for the theory and practice of archaeology in India. One common aspect in all these three is the emphasis on community or tribal groups. In the Indian context, while community engagement is relatively more pronounced in autoethnography and museums, such community engagement has not made much headway, especially by tribals in India, with regard to their archaeological heritage. Autoethnography in Northeast India has emerged as a means of their assertion. जो आपका जो एथनिक आइडेंटिटी जो है, आप देख रहे हैं जो मूवमेंट जितना भी चल रहा है आपका नॉर्थ ईस्ट में, उसमें not only the kind of autoethnography is playing an important role, museum is also playing an important role. आप Manipur is a small state. If you go to Manipur, you will find so many sort of म्यूजियम, स्मॉल म्यूजियम, एक छोटा सा कमरा है, दो कमरा है, एंड उनका जो कम्युनिटी का है वो कम्युनिटी मटेरियल कल्चरल डिस्प्ले. ये दीज आर मीन्स ऑफ asserting their ethnicity. Now, autoethnography in Northeast India has emerged as a means of their assertion. In addition, the various community museums, a number of them are seen in northeastern state of Manipur, may be regarded as a means of assertion. One would not be surprised that their days are not far off when archaeology would be used for such and other purposes. In this regard, one could say that inadequate community engagement implies archaeological practice in India to be somewhat elitist, relatively exclusive and alienating, reducing archaeology to use a pejorative to a harmless hobby. Like autoethnography and new museology, could autoarchaeology play a role in giving or sharpening voice to the voiceless in India to make archaeological practice becoming more inclusive and democratizing? I think it has already made its humble beginning. Only time will say whether it will be a mighty river or not. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. It is always great learning and matter of enjoy to listen you, because you always put some new perspective and new thoughts, and it's quite I like encouraging for all of us, and I always feel very happy and very grateful to you for accepting our invitation and gracing this occasion. Definitely, I think the topic which you have just talked about need a public lecture from you for much wider audience, because you have put certain things, particularly on indigenous, what you were saying, absolutely right. Because I keep discussing this, and there's a lot of difference between, because I'm engaged in a very important UNESCO Global Task Force on indigenous languages, because UNESCO is celebrating this decade as a decade of decade of indigenous languages, and I see a huge difference between our perception or their perception, and many times they don't agree to also. And this is a problem with this such international workshops and conferences, that they put their own thoughts, which we have to actually prepare, and scholar like you can be the right person to counter argue and give new definition to the various terminologies, which we are still studying, because we all know that many of our education terminologies used in various discipline are borrowed from European or other communities, and I think this time is right now very, very appropriate that we should invent our own way of defining things and putting our perspective, and this book may be some base for further discussion and further we definitely miss our other two guests, but I think your speech complimented each and every. And now we are feeling okay. They are not there. We have good opportunity to see you more time. So thank you very much. Thank you all, and I'm so glad and I'm very happy to see such an eminent audience in today's book discussion. They really, that's the beauty of our book discussion, that we in every book discussion we found new audience and very eminent audience on the subject. Our main aim of having this program is to connect people, authors to the readers, right? Because authors put a lot of efforts. And this particular book is something which we were also partner in that, as mentioned by the author. So I take this opportunity to thank you all, and looking forward to you. We have very important celebrations on 30th of July at 4 p.m. in Ambedkar International Center. We have just got nominated Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Natya Shastra in UNESCO World Heritage, Documentary Heritage. So we have a big program starting on 30th July at 4 p.m. We have our Honorable Minister and Gyananji Maharaj and other scholars will be there to speak. We invite you to join us on 30th for that program, and that will be followed by a one-day discussion on 31st here in IGNC on a different aspect of how Bhagavad Gita and Natya Shastra are still relevant and having a much bigger impact on the research community. Apart from that, we also have a memorial lecture series in which we have number of collections received from great scholars. You know, Professor Nambar Singh was an eminent scholar in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he donated his personal library to our library. So every year on his birthday we organize a memorial lecture. So this year it is on 28th of July. So you are also welcome to come on 28th July on the ground floor of this building. There is the auditorium. So with this, I thank everybody and invite you for a cup of tea outside this hall, and look forward to your association with IGNC.